We're in the information age, but facts are in short supply. Reject the noise, ask bold questions, and seek the truth with FBI whistleblower and common sense extremist, Steve Friend. This is the American Radicals Podcast.
It is the American Radicals Podcast. It's Tuesday, April 7th, 2026. And today we're going to do some, as they said in Lego Batman, we're going to do some reading. We're going to read into a bunch of stories that were already predetermined and pre-written by our communist media, the sob stories about illegal aliens. They're trying to spin the narrative so that you feel bad about mass deportations. We're also going to talk about artificial intelligence potentially ruining public opinion polls. And finally, science may have settled the ultimate defend your gender debate. We'll finish up with that. So let's get after it. But before we get to everything, guys, I want to give you a really cool and exciting update about the American Radicals Podcast. I normally like to position this sort of reminder later in the show, but I'm very excited. And that is to tell you that our Spotify platform has now reached the threshold. We have enough followers there to monetize the show. So I'm in the process of getting approval from Spotify, and hopefully in the not too distant future, we'll be able to turn this amateurish endeavor into a professional one. And that is all entirely thanks to you all supporting us, not just on Spotify, but on Rumble and YouTube and iTunes and X and all those different places. So guys, thank you again. And as a reminder, do all those things: like, share, subscribe, follow, all the things helping us grow and launch this thing into the stratosphere, like the Artemis II space mission that's still presently going on. But let's talk about what we want to talk about today, and that is some illegal alien narrative stuff that's going on. So I found a whole slew of these stories, and they're the exact sort of stories that I cautioned about and have been cautioning about for about a year and a half. Since Donald Trump, Part 2, was elected in November of 2024. I said at the time, and I've continued to hammer home over and over again because it is extremely important. The news media in this country is not about journalism. It's about propaganda. They have a predetermined outcome. They have a predetermined preferred outcome, and they will spin on behalf of that like a top. So the stories were already written. They just need to plug in the names. The story was going to be about Abuela, who's been in this country for so long. She's settled into the fabric of our society, and she's got not just kids who are illegal, but grandkids and potentially great-grandkids. And because of the mean orange, literally Hitler president who we have, he's trying to kick her out of the country. And don't you feel bad? She's got that diabetes, and she can't get the health care she needs. So her great-great-granddaughter is having to pull 3 jobs under the table, and you're going to divide up this family. How could you possibly even? And I've said it over and over again. We have a country. We have a social compact with our government with very finite amount of issues that the American people agreed to give up some of their liberties in return from the government. One of those few finite charges that we demand and expect of our government is to defend our border sovereignty and eject criminal illegal aliens. But I repeat myself, they're all criminals. They've all violated our national sovereignty, and they all have to go. So many of our problems are downstream from that. I'm going to continue to stay on it, and I think you all agree with me. Otherwise, our Spotify would not have grown to the point where we can monetize. So let's go into some of the stories, pick them apart, and then remind you why you cannot fall for this trap. The trap is they hit you in the feels. You just, oh man, can't we just bend the rules on this one? No, not just because it's a principle matter. But once you bend the rules for one, you have set a precedent for a case-by-case analysis. And that can never happen when the project before you is ejecting 30 to 50 million people. We don't have the time. We don't have the resources. We don't have the bandwidth. We have to go now. So first, the sob stories, which, if you actually take the time to read, are not that sympathetic, but the New York Times and the Washington Post, they don't really count on the readership reading into the details like we do here on the AMRAD pod. So let's get after it. The New York Times, at one point, a newspaper, headline: ICE agents detain newlywed spouse of soldier training to deploy. So we've got patriotism through the armed forces. We've got newlyweds. Oh man, we got it all on this one. And it is a very long piece. But as a background, our two people here, well, the one illegal alien, her name is Annie. She's 22. And her now husband, his name is Matt. He's in the Army. He's a sergeant. They're 22, 23 years old. So young love springs eternal. Annie and Sergeant Blank is his name, Matthew Blank. They began dating early last year. They connected on a dating app, which, as an aside, thank God I found Madam Friend before that was a thing. I don't know how people are navigating those waters right now. But as the story goes, this sergeant in the Army used a dating app and found his girlfriend, who happened to be an illegal alien from Honduras. Now, she was brought to this country through no fault of her own. Don't you feel bad? And this guy, because he's 23 and really stupid, not just meets her on the dating app, but decides to marry her in under a year, as a lot of infantry guys make that mistake. So they wind up getting married, and the emotion and the histrionics, the atmospherics, they try to establish, because there's a small wedding, 60 people. They go down to Houston, where she was raised, because she's been here since she was a toddler, and her family was there and his family was there, and they had Spanish rice and fried chicken, a very, Honduran type of meal. And then they get married. Now, as a background for Annie, our illegal alien from Honduras, brought here as a youth, she was ordered deported 20 years ago, 2005. She was a year and a half old at that time, and her family failed to appear at their court date. So, no fault of her own, potentially. Yeah, she was brought here. But her mom and her dad, who were at the wedding, mind you, because they were legal aliens still in this country, they crapped the bed. They failed to comply with the court order. So there was a deportation order put out there for over 20 years. Now, Annie, further along in her youth, she applied for DACA under the Obama administration, deferred action for childhood arrivals, DACA. That's when the Obama administration said, we're full-on dictators at this point. We are not going to enforce the law as it pertains to deportations. So if you're a young person, you get to stay, ollie ollie oxen free. Now, Annie applied for it, and the Trump administration came in post-Obama and said, no, we're not doing that anymore, which has been an ongoing fight, because I guess you can be a dictator in one direction, but you can't undo the dictator in the other in this country. Again, it's a broken social compact. And now we got to hit you in even more of the feels. Said, we got our patriot. We got a guy out there laying his life on the line to defend America. And young love, how could you? She's a devout Christian now on top of that. She teaches Sunday school. And when she was in high school, she was in the marching band. So I guess that's supposed to, because she played the flute or the tuba. She gets to stay in America. I don't know. She can join a mariachi band and go down to Honduras, for as far as I can tell. And she's in school for biochemistry, hasn't graduated yet. Now, the background on the process, the way it's supposed to work. If you're an illegal alien, or in the case of the New York Times, they call you an undocumented immigrant, and you wind up marrying an American citizen, you get sort of a stay on execution. You can apply, you become eligible for permanent residency. That means a green card. And in 3 years, you can try to become a citizen. Eligible, no guarantee. This is the due process. And even those with prior deportation orders, like in the case with Annie, they they're not typically detained according to the New York Times. But now we're dealing with some language, right? Like, these things are often issued to children and they're not typically detained. Okay, any sources, New York Times, not typically detained? Who's telling you that? Oh, they tell you. Experts. No further information. Experts say, according to the New York Times, that even though you've been ordered deported, if you're hooked up with an American, they don't send you away. So everything we're dealing with right now is completely unprecedented, because in the era of Donald Trump Part 2, we've never had a president before, other than the prior time he was president, a guy who was so mean, orange, and literally Hitler. So now we're going to quote the sergeant, Sergeant Matt Blank. Quote, "I knew she didn't have status. We were doing everything the right way." No, you weren't, bro. You married an illegal alien. That's not doing it the right way. You should have assessed all of that. Nobody did it the right way. Her parents came across the border illegally. They defied a deportation order. She applied for an illegal program, and then when that didn't happen, she didn't just self-deport. She continued to remain here. Barack Obama was president a long time ago. Donald Trump was president in 2017 when they stopped the DACA stuff. This is not recent. So spare me the waterworks here. Now, how did she get arrested? Because again, they did everything the right way, and they're young and very, very dumb. So they drove up to the military installation because they're newlywed. He wants his new bride to be able to live on post, wants to get her a military ID. They show up and they meet the guy at the guard shack, and they don't have anything for him. I mean, they have a passport from a different country. They have a marriage license, and they say, "Oh, we're good, right? Right?" And the guy's like, "Stand by. Let me check on this one because this is a foreign national, not an American citizen. And I'm supposed to protect this installation from foreigners. I don't think that marrying this person allows him on post, but I'll call my supervisor," which he does. They then detain Annie and call up ICE. So ICE, and according to the New York Times, they're so apologetic, but they're just good Germans. They have to just follow orders, and they wind up detaining and removing Annie, and she's now in some sort of holding center awaiting a deportation. Is this a sad story? Yeah, it is. But does that change what has to happen? If Sergeant Blank wants to marry Annie, there's nothing stopping him from being married to Annie while she's living in Honduras. They can work through the process. They said, "Oh, our attorney, he had already filed the paperwork to get some sort of a stay on this execution, but he hadn't filed it yet." Well, again, I thought you did everything the right way. You didn't. And now there's consequences. You've been given a process. You failed, and she's got to go. And you can spare me the whole, he's a patriot and young love and no fault of their own. I did like this statement that we got here. Again, I'll throw it one more time up there from the New York Times, this piece about this newlywed who's now been put in process to be deported. We got a quote from the Department of Homeland Security who said that Annie had been arrested, quote, "after she attempted to enter a military base. She has no legal status to be in this country and was issued a final order of removal by a judge. This administration is not going to ignore the rule of law. Everything that is there is factually accurate. She received due process." And wasn't there this whole thing where nobody is above the law? That includes illegal aliens. So now Annie's got to go. And sorry, not sorry if that hits you in the feels. Let's go to another story. This one comes from CBS News. Headline: family buries 19-year-old Mexican man who died in ICE custody. Quote, "They fabricated a crime." So we had a wedding, and I guess now we have to have a funeral to bring things full circle. And this is about a guy whose name is Royer Perez Jimenez. Now, they got a quote here at CBS News from his uncle. His uncle's name is Manuel. He said that his nephew, now deceased, was a hard worker who immigrated at age 15 to, quote, triumph and help his family. So he came from Mexico to make some money. No sort of refugee status, just a typical run-of-the-mill illegal alien who surged across our border and is violating our sovereignty. He was arrested in January of this year on suspicion of resisting arrest, false identity, but he insists that he was confused because he didn't speak English. When I say he, his uncle, because the actual individual here is not alive anymore. He can't contest whether or not he speaks English or not. His uncle said, yeah, he came here at age 15, which means that he'd been here for 5 years and didn't learn English. Hardly assimilating into the culture here, winds up getting arrested and gets in my neck of the woods, Edgewater, Florida, about 10 miles south of me. The cops grabbed him up there. And then later on, he dies in custody. And then CBS News, as they want to do here to try to create a larger problem out of this one anecdote. I mean, they're going to say, well, the plural of anecdote is data. So they'll make that transition to be like, oh, well, now we have our individual case and we can just transpose that onto a larger overall problem. So they said that at least 14 migrants, illegal aliens, of various nationalities have died in ICE custody in 2026, according to their officials. And amid President Trump's ongoing immigration crackdown, and last year, 31 ICE detainees died, which was a 2-decade high. Well, there are more people in custody. Ergo, in custody deaths statistically are more likely to increase, right? We're not saying that they're being brought into a detention facility and executed summarily, saying that anytime you house a large number of people, there's illness, there's suicides, there's all these other things that happen and may happen. And when you have more people now than you've ever had, because we're in the process of trying to do mass deportations, that's statistically consistent with what you would expect to see. But CBS News hopes you don't really connect those dots there. And really, let's delve a little bit more into this story. They're spinning really, really hard. This guy died in custody. No further information. Well, how did he die? What happened? He didn't speak English, and then they said that he presented a fake name. Really? Really? In 5 years, he didn't figure out that nombre means name, and they said ID or what's your name? I imagine the officers could speak some tactical Spanish, like I was trained to do as a uniformed police officer, right? Me llamo es, that sort of thing, right? But this guy gives a fake name. So he intended to lie because he was an illegal alien. But I went over to the ICE website, the actual press release on this, to get a little bit more information. And the headline here kind of gives you a lot. Criminal legal alien from Mexico passes away at Glades County Detention Facility. He dies because he commits suicide. Now, at intake, you're deceased here. You can't really call him a victim. You're dead illegal. Royer Perez Jimenez. He answered no to all the suicide screening questions. Well, did he speak English or not? I think they probably have some linguists at the ICE facility, right? To make sure that they understand all the questions. So he either lied or he didn't understand the questions, as it's implied here. The family implies that not only should he not have been arrested for the charges that he was arrested for, resisting arrest, lying about your name, but he answered the questions wrong. It was just a big, giant mistake because he didn't understand. He was being asked what his name was. Did he not understand what the suicide questions were? So he's just a liar. And all of that apart, he's an illegal alien. He shouldn't be in the country. He's 19 years old. He's an adult. We don't even have to play the game where it's, well, he's just a child. You really, really MAGA Doppler want to remove children? What are you going to do? Take some sort of kindergartner and toss them off the border? Well, that's a good transition to the third story that I have. And this one also comes from CBS News. Headline, Liam Conejo Ramos constantly worries about being detained by ICE again. His parents say, quote, my boy is very different. Now, if you don't know who Liam Conejo Ramos is, congratulations, you're a normal American. You have seen him, though, because of all the spin that happened. This is the 5-year-old kid who was wearing the weird blue teddy bear winter cap in Minneapolis. And then the stories all came out about how ICE arrested a kindergartner. Well, now we have an update and the spin has continued. All the spin, mind you, is happening despite the Trump administration's attempts to dial it back, right? We're just going to do targeted operations. Just get the worst offenders. We got to get that media on our side. There's just too much bad press out there. Our goal is in 6 months, maybe none of these news reports will be coming out. Well, it's April 2026. You've been in office for 16 months, and yet the stories keep coming out. I guess Mark Wayne Mullen, the Secretary of Homeland Security, his ambitions are falling flat on their face. It's like Mean Girls doesn't work. You won the election. You got the it kid to break up with his girlfriend and come to you. How did you get it? You said we're going to do mass deportations. Damn the torpedoes. We don't like the fake news anyway. And then as soon as you got into power, as soon as there was any sort of pushback, you thought, well, I really kind of like the mean girl's friend, so I'm going to pivot here and scale back and be punished because the it kid's going to say, oh, you misrepresented yourself. I guess I'll go somewhere else. Because at least the mean girl who's doing the exact same thing as you, she's hotter than you are, and she'll probably give me lots of free bennies. They haven't done that calculation. But to this story specifically, the spin on this 5-year-old kid. Now, CBS News went out there and did an exclusive. They interviewed his parents in America who are illegal aliens. So CBS News can find them. Why can't ICE? But the headline again is about this kid, Luis Conejo Ramos, constantly worries about being detained by ICE again. His parents say that, quote, my boy is very different. So it's been more than 2 months since he was taken into ICE custody alongside with his father, while wearing his blue bunny hat. That's right. It was a rabbit, not a bear. Sorry, potatoes. And he had a school backpack, and it was this really amazing image. And you had judges in immigration court using his photograph on judicial documents. So his father, Adrian Arias, he said his son now regularly sees a psychologist. He's also more prone to acting up and behaving badly, his mother said. She said that he was playful, but now he doesn't want to go to certain classes and play with other children. He's 5. He's a kindergartner. He's not that complicated. They're just completely full of crap, making this stuff up. But the family remains in legal peril, according to CBS News, because they're at risk of potentially being detained a second time and ultimately deported. Because the update to this story, and we covered down on it at the time, was they got detained, father and son. And then a judge said, you know what? I'm going to let them go because ICE had a quota, and that is just too egregious. This is a violation. I don't know why. There's no civil liberties attached to an illegal alien, but they said the quota made it so bad that we have to let the father and son, both illegal aliens, go ollie ollie oxen free. So the Trump administration right now is trying to fight. They don't want to lose a bad PR battle on this one, especially. And the family is still concerned that they might be deported. Again, mom, dad, 5-year-old, all illegal aliens. No action being taken. We know who they are. CBS News can go and find them anytime. And yet, no action. Now, the story at the time was that dad and little boy were in the driveway, and ICE came up, and they just snatched this kid, and they were going to deport a 5-year-old. No, that's not what happened. Dad saw the ICE guys, and he just abandoned his kid and ran. So the ICE guys caught him and then got the kid. And then what wasn't reported at the time, but subsequently I did some digging on this, ICE went to the kid's house where his mom was, knocked on the door and said, we have your kid. Can you come get him? And mom refused to answer the door because she's an illegal alien. So both parents ditched their kid. That's just how much they're concerned about him and his PTSD that he's suffering from. Now, she claimed I had an older kid, so I had to take care of that one, and I didn't want to get myself deported. But ultimately, what it comes down to is mom and dad abandoned their child to the custody of law enforcement professionals. And we're supposed to have a case of the feels here for this family. I think it's probably pretty strong ground to say separating this family is going to be an objective good for this kid. What sort of values do they have if they will not stand by a kindergartner? In fact, they'll allow him to be exploited by a communist news media in order to push across this fake story, this fake message, all of this spin that we have to somehow acquiesce to what the communists want, and that is to allow 30, 40, 50 million illegal aliens to remain in this country because they can find a half a dozen sympathetic stories that really, when you read through it, aren't that sympathetic. One more fact, said mom and dad, they abandoned the 5-year-old. They have an older kid. Just so you know, she's knocked up again. She'll have another illegal alien kid. And then, we can't separate that family at all. We should just let all 5 of them remain here, right? Final quote from the dad. Quote, I think it was an injustice that they did that to us when in reality we were doing everything right. Were you right when you abandoned your son? Were you right when you illegally crossed the border? I'm still waiting to find out what right thing you did. Nothing at all. Just like this entire spin that's going on with the media to distract you, the consumer of the news, into changing your way of thought. Now, let me reorient it. Maybe you're not like at Real Steve Friend here on the American Radicals podcast, available YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, X, everything at AM Radpod every weekday. Again, guys, thank you again for helping us monetize the Spotify. Continue to do all those things like follow, subscribe, share, tell a friend, do everything you can, even if you got to send some smoke signals, trying to grow this thing out. But let's say you're not heartless like me. Let's say maybe you're being moved over here into the whole polling category that says, well, I guess just the worst offenders. Maybe I can present some counter narratives that you won't see because they're kind of buried. So, Judicial Watch has the following headline: Americans pay over $1 billion a year to subsidize illegal aliens' college education. They're just doing everything the right way. They deserve to go to college. You should pay for it. So, some background on this one: there is a law. It's the Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act of 1996, during the Clinton era, a Democrat who deported a ton of illegal aliens. Remember Elian Gonzalez? Remember how egregious that image was? They sent that kid packing. Meanwhile, we got the bunny hat kid still hanging out. So one section of this, it bans states from granting reduced tuition to illegal aliens. You can't just say, well, you live in the state, you get to benefit from a reduced tuition. I live in Florida. If my children try to attend a public university in the state of Florida, we will get lower tuition than somebody who wants to attend a public university in the state of Florida and they come from a different state, because we've been paying taxes and they want to make sure that we're keeping the knowledge base here in this state. We don't want to have any brain drain. It makes sense. But this law, signed in 1996, said, no, you can't do that. And yet 22 states plus Washington, D.C., so 23 jurisdictions are currently doing it. How are they doing that? Well, that's being subsidized by their taxpayers. So taxpayers in 22 states and Washington, D.C. are paying, subsidizing, having their money stolen, I mean taxed, so that illegal aliens can go to college and not pay as much as you, an American citizen. There are currently 500,000 illegal aliens enrolled in universities. Can we not send ICE to some registrar offices? I mean, we know their class schedules. Can we not just go pick them up there? And we haven't followed through on this. And meanwhile, they're bleeding these localities dry financially. You're paying for it. Now, the good news is that there is a stalwart of conservatism out there who's really pushing hard to rectify the problem. And that is Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton. He has now introduced the Put American Students First Act, which has been out for a couple months, and the bill points out that this creates a perverse incentive. Yeah, you think? That comes from the Institute of Very Obvious Things. If you give free money or reduce tuition to anybody, let alone an illegal alien, that will just attract them to come. So Tom Cotton, stalwart of conservatism, says, hey, we're not obeying these laws, these 22 states in Washington, D.C. It's not obeying this law that's been on the books for 30 years. So you know what would really help? Passing another law. That's propaganda. That's spin from the senator as well. So one ineffective piece of paper is going to be bolstered by another ineffective piece of paper. Senator Cotton, do better, bro. All right, let's go now to another reminder. We've covered on several of them, and this is another. Illegal aliens murdering American citizens. This is a local news report. Comes from Fairfax County, Virginia. 2 illegal immigrants, illegal aliens, get 5 years for murder under Fairfax County plea deal. 5 years, guys. 5 years. So they faced 40 years, but they're now, after a plea bargain, going to get 5. The reason why: the 2 men will be serving 5 years is because the county Commonwealth's attorney, whose name is Steve Descano, and we've talked about Steve Descano before, he's one of these Soros dudes who just lets all the criminals out. He offered them a generous plea deal, and both men immediately took it. So far, there have been 4 murders in Fairfax County this year, and 3 of the 4, so 75%, if we're going to be doing number crunching, are illegal aliens. And on the Commonwealth attorney, the county prosecutor, on his website, according to this piece over at ABC7 News, Steve Descano's website says the following, quote, wherever possible, Steve will make charging and plea decisions that limit or avoid immigration consequences. So if you are an illegal alien and you reside in Fairfax County, just outside of Washington, D.C., one of those localities that gives reduced tuition to illegal aliens, if you commit some sort of a violent felony, or if you commit any crime at all and you're an illegal alien, the county Commonwealth, the prosecutor, whatever the hell his name is in his job, Steve Descano, he will do whatever is within his power to make sure that he gets you out of custody so that ICE doesn't come and grab you. That's a pretty specific quote. Again, wherever possible, Steve will make charging and plea decisions that limit or avoid immigration consequences. And it's attributed to Steve Descano's website. So I looked it up. And I pulled it up, and look what I found, guys. Quote, we couldn't find the page you were looking for because they took it down. You want to talk about some spin. This guy doesn't even have the courage of his communist convictions. He doesn't want people to know that he's allowed 2 murderers to essentially get off for nothing. 5 years for taking an American's life? How is that any sort of justice? But look, all of this today is building towards the point. The point is that these stories were pre-written or written in earnest or having artificial intelligence write it, whatever they had to do within a communist media to sway the public opinion. And it could be working, it could not. I mean, how much do you trust the public polling out there? We've been told constantly, no matter what, if a poll does not agree with what you say it's a fake poll. Donald Trump is notorious for that, but he's hardly alone in that category. The effort is we got to get public sentiment against mass deportation so that we can allow 30, 40, 50 million illegal aliens to remain in the country, and then we can give them amnesty, and then we can have a permanent majority voting communists in this country. That's why it's going on. But when we push the polls through the propaganda the media puts out there, there's another way that could be going into it. So let's pivot into polling and let's pivot into some artificial intelligence. And this is wild stuff. Okay. This comes from the New York Times. It's an opinion essay headline. It's called Silicon Sampling, and it's going to ruin public opinion polling. So the background for silicone sampling, the individual here wrote about a story that he saw in Axios about health policy. And the story referenced, quote, findings indicating some sort of a poll was conducted. But after clicking through all the links, the individual here found out that it wasn't a public opinion poll, but it was a computer simulation run by artificial intelligence, this company called Aru, A-A-R-U. So what is silicon sampling? It uses computer simulations of human opinions in place of actually doing the polling. We're just going to simulate it like the metaverse. Now, polling is very difficult. It's very expensive. And today, I mean, who's going to answer a call from a number on their cell phone that they don't have pre-saved in their contacts list? Nobody. And nobody has the landline phones, which a lot of these public polling places were using. And who's going to answer an internet poll question? They're going to think, oh, yeah, they're just going to steal my data. I'm not going to do it, right? So the Herculean effort to get a public opinion poll, very costly, very time intensive. And what winds up happening? Well, sometimes just chance happens. Let's say you poll 100 people. And let's say theoretically the country is 50-50 split, thereabout, roughly, Democrat, Republican. So you should theoretically have 50 Republicans, 50 Democrats. But in a sample of 100 people, if you go to one particular area, you might not get that. You might get 80 Republicans and 20 Democrats. Well, how do we then get an accurate opinion poll out of this? Well, these public polling places, they come up with their own sort of statistical models to balance it out. And there could be, they say, the margin of error, and there's a biases that attach to it, which is why you get one poll asks the same question as another, and depending on how they bias it, it might be wildly different results. So there's bias to acknowledge. So pollsters use these polls not just to get information like they should. That should be their ultimate endeavor. Like law enforcement, follow the process. If the facts support a conviction, it's because the facts did, not because you're awesome. If the facts don't support a conviction, it means the facts didn't support it, not because you suck. Polling should be similar, should have a similar endeavor. We want to get a snapshot of where people believe something should be at any given point. But instead, what happens is these pollsters get political and they ask questions in a certain way and to create an outcome that they want because, I don't know, a political candidate needs a poll to say something so they can get some more donations, or maybe people look around and they get peer pressured and think like, well, am I the only one who thinks this? I guess I'll just go along with the crowd. And again, that's not the job, theoretically, of a pollster, but it is. So they use these biases and they could move things along, and that's how they become the fake polls. So I understand the endeavor. I understand thinking, well, we're just going to kind of automate it. We're not going to leave it in the hands of some nefarious actor who's conducting this poll. So let's just use artificial intelligence. Well, there's never been any bias in that, right? Oh. But again, we're away from the prime directive. Is our goal to get to the current opinion, the snapshot, or is the goal to predict the future opinion, which is exactly what the silicon sampling is doing? It's building a model, it's building an algorithm that is producing what it predicts will be the opinion. You haven't actually captured the real opinion. And it's being used to generate, in this case from Axios, a news report about what people in America think about some health policy matter when no people were actually asked. How is that not complete spin? How is that not ripe for abuse? Well, I mean, Steve, come on. Maybe they really have a great predictive model. You just hate technology. You're a Luddite. Well, let's look to the specific simulation, the specific, what do they call it again? This silicone sampling company, right? The ARU, not sure. ARU. They did a actual predictive simulation of the 2024 presidential election. How good were they? Well, they predicted Kamala Harris was going to win. So maybe some problems with the modeling going on there with this specific company. I think just intellectually as its entirety, this is a problem, and it's going to demand a lot of scrutiny whenever you read anything now that says, well, study finds or findings indicate, was it of people or was it of Hal? And he was just out there, or it was just out there saying what it was predicting that people would say. All right. I think we've covered down on a bunch of serious stuff today, but I did hold back some dessert, guys, because as I teased it out in the beginning, we have finally, at long last, the answer. Science has settled the ultimate defend your gender debate. No spin, just the facts. AI can't be involved in this. This required actual lab coats and goggles, maybe some Bunsen burners. They definitely needed Bunsen burners because the study was, and the question was, headline from the Washington Post, because democracy dies in darkness. Do men or women have worse farts? Science has the answer. Finally, at last, we will get to it. Defend your gender. Where do you fall? Well, here it is. The guy here, his name is Michael Levitt. He's a gastroenterologist. I'm sorry. I can't believe this is in an actual newspaper. It is actually a bonus from a book that was pulled out here, but still fun nonetheless. He used a gas chromatograph. I don't know. He used some sort of sniffing machine in order to detect what the odors were, they actually had a bunch of test subjects come in and agree to consume a bunch of pinto beans. And then they inserted like rectal tubes, like they're anal probing aliens, in order to test to find out who generates the stinkiest aromas. You want to know who? I'm going to tell you who. It's a tie, but not a real tie. The way that the study came out was women, the fairer sex, have the smellier farts, but men produce more gas, ergo, it might kind of level out. So it's a tie, but you know what? That's just spin. Girls, you are worse than us. Own it. Be honest about it. Don't try to play any manipulative games. Don't be spinning like tops out there. And on that subject, guys, as we're wrapping up here, I do have a fun palate cleanse and another debate, not just who generates the stinkier aromas, but what is the worst pain? Childbirth or getting kicked in the twig and berries? We can finally get our answer to this one as well.
Michael, what do you think is more painful, giving birth or getting kicked in the balls?
What's more painful? Childbirth or getting kicked in the balls?
Yes. Which one is more painful?
I would have to say getting kicked in the balls is way more painful than childbirth.
Why?
Well, if you look at just history, well, just think of it. You never see a man get kicked in the balls, and then like a year or two later, he's like, you know what? I'd love to get kicked in the balls again.
You know what, Michael? That does not mean that it's more painful.
But women, they'll do the things like childbirth was the most pain I ever had in my life. Let's do that again.
There's like this amnesia that comes over us, you know, and then we're
You
like,
never forget when you get kicked in the balls. You never forget.
You never forget. Yet again, men for the win. All right, guys. Thanks again for joining us today on the American Radicals podcast. Plan to be back with you tomorrow, noontime on YouTube and Rumble. And always head on over to Spotify if you happen to miss the live stream. Everything at AmRadPod. And until then, have a great day.
You've been listening to the American Radicals podcast. Find us on YouTube, Rumble, and X at AmRad.